It's line 2. What you got for me?
So, when I was a kid, we had this babysitter stay with us one night, right? The phone rang while we were all watching TV, and the babysitter thought it might be my mom. But when she picks up the phone, there's this loud laugh. Then the guy on the other end of the phone goes, "1 more hour." Half an hour later, he calls again.
Oh my God. And the calls were coming from inside the house.
Well,
Into the bogus barn you go. That one's older than my granny. Oh, you're gonna have to work harder than that to sneak one past me, my little wolf babies. Caller, you're on right here, right now. Howl at your wolf man.
I'd rather not.
What's your deal?
It only just happened to me. I was a little shaken up.
Well, then Dr. Wolfman's in the house to give you some therapy, kid. Lay it on me.
Okay, the name's Joan, by the way.
Hi, Joan.
I was in Philly a few days ago for a business trip, staying with some friends. I have trouble sleeping anyway, but I really have trouble getting sleep when I'm traveling. I want to be all fresh for my meeting the next day, so I tried to expend all the energy I could by going out the night before. My friends and I went to the bar, we drank, we saw the city and everything. But when I made it back to that place, I still couldn't sleep at all. I was tossing and turning for hours. I was ready to stop banging my head on the wall.
Oh, bless you.
Until I heard the car turn into the driveway. I got up to see it was coming around so late at night, and when I looked out the window, I saw the car. It was a long black hearse. There was probably 7 or 8 people in there. The driver looked up at me. He was hideous. I can't even describe it, but just looking at me made me want to throw up. He smiled this horrifying rictus at me and tipped his hat and said, "We're going out. There's room for 1 more." He waited a minute or two, the driver, and when I didn't respond, he just drove away. The next morning I told my friends about it, and they said I must have been dreaming. I mean, okay, I have sleep issues, especially when I travel. I know I didn't get to sleep all night. I know I could have been dreaming.
Right.
Anyway, I was already a wreck, but I went to my meeting. I was in one of those high-rises downtown all day, and at the end of the day, I went to the elevator, but when it arrived, the elevator was crowded, almost to bursting. I was about to say, well, blast it, I'll figure it out and figure out how to fit in there anyway. I do not want to wait for the next one, but then the face, the driver of the hearse was in there. He peered out at me, stared at me, smiled that skeleton smile at me, and tipped his hat. We are going down, there's room for 1 more. I just said, no thanks, and the doors closed. The elevator started downward, but then I heard shrieking and screaming. There was this loud clatter, and the elevator crashed to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone aboard was killed.
Oh, heavy.
Yeah, and you thought I wasn't sleeping before. I really am not sleeping now.
Well, you try to get some shut-eye, Joan, my dear girl. Now, I think we have time for 1 more caller before we have to go to another break. Let's go to Charlie on line 2. Charlie, you're on the air.
Hey, hello.
You sound a little edgy, Chuck. What's happened to you?
Yeah, I think I'm cursed.
Cursed? Well, let's have it, Chucky, my man.
Well, a long time ago, not long, I don't know, it's been years. This goes back to my fraternity days, man. The frat doesn't exist anymore. It was banned years ago. We had only 9 members at that point, and we were taking on 2 more. These guys, Jack and Ernie. One night around this time of year, the 9 of us took them out into the country for their initiation. Our hazings rituals were pretty insane, really intense.
What did you do, man? Did you make him kidnap a goat?
Yeah, but no. We brought them to this old deserted house where 2 guys about our age had been murdered recently. The murderer was still out there somewhere.
Oh, that is intense, man.
Yeah, well, it didn't stop there. We gave Jack a lighted candle, and we told him to go up to the 3rd floor. Stay there for an hour, we told him, and then come back down. Don't speak, don't make any noise. If your candle goes out, carry on in the dark. Yeah, so he did, and he took the candle and he went inside. And from where we were standing, we could see the light from Jack's candle moving up the stairs to the 2nd floor, and then to the 3rd. And when we got to the 3rd floor, his candle went out. Yeah, and we guessed he'd gotten to a drafty corner and the wind just blew it right out, right? You know, so we didn't think anything of it. But then like an hour went by and we weren't so sure about that. We waited another 15 minutes and we got more and more nervous.
Yeah, what'd you do?
Oh, well, you know, we sent Ernie, the other guy, right? You know, we sent him in after. You know, I mean, same thing as before. We saw the candlelight go up to the second floor, and then to the third floor, and then it went out, you know. We waited 10 minutes, and then 20, and there was no sign of either of them. So we called for them to come down, but there was no answer, no. I mean, finally we decided to go up and get them, right? I mean, we were armed. The flashlights, and we started upstairs. Big ones like mag lights, man. Mag lights.
Oh, you take that over top of one of them.
It was quiet, and it was dark. I mean, at the freaking grave in the house. I didn't say freaking on the radio.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
We got to the second floor, and we called out again, man, but nothing. Nothing. Then the third floor, and it was this big open space like an attic, and Jack and Ernie, they weren't there, man. But we saw footprints in the dust, and they were leading to the window that was wide open. There was fresh blood near the window.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It must have been 20, 25, 30 feet to the ground. It's boom, man. But we didn't see anything. I mean, not like a ladder or a rope. I mean, they could have used to get down there. I mean, nothing.
Yeah, so they couldn't have been pulling a prank on you, huh?
Oh, no. We came up to the third floor by the only way in or out. I mean, we searched the whole rest of the house and the land around it. It was a lot, but we didn't see anything. Nothing. I mean, we were hoping the blood in the attic was a trick, you know, to throw us off. Because we didn't find any more of it anywhere else, but they didn't come around at all. And the next day, we told the dean of men what happened, and he reported it to the police. I mean, the cops didn't find anything either. And after a few weeks, the search just ended, man. And to this day, no one has any idea what happened to Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. I remember that. We weren't arrested or anything, but the college disbanded the frat and suspended the 9 of us from school for a year, man.
Heavy. But you said something about you was being cursed.
I did. The strangest part of this came after we finally graduated, man. Someone must put a curse on us every year since that fateful day, around the time of the initiation, around this time of year, one of us has died or gone crazy. It's been 9 years and I'm the only one left. and I'm in pretty good health, man. But there are times when I feel just a little peculiar.
Well, that's all the time we have around here right now. We're going to take a little break to hear from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere, my little old babies. I'll find you.
Every year, hundreds of thousands of animals in Mexico are left to try their luck in the streets. The poorly appointed shelters can't contain them all, and many of them are found dead in the gutters of Mexico's cities. Dogs, cats, and other animals who just want to be loved by someone. And they want someone to love. Like this guy here. This is Foamy. Foamy is a dog. We're going with dog. One of these Mexican hairless things or something. He was found in a street market in Acapulco by some vacationers and is now fighting for his life, even with the advanced medical care that we can render here in the States. The new pet animal rescue can only do so much, and that's where you come in. We're looking for able-bodied volunteers to help rescue sweet little creatures like Foamy here from the mean streets of Mexico and bring them to our own United States. We're also looking for donations to help fund our efforts to make every animal on the continent feel loved and welcome in a home like yours. Will you help? Can our little foamy but Mexican hairless dog come to you?
That's not a dog.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's not a dog, it's a rat.
You're serious?
I'm very serious. That is a giant sewer rat, and it looks rabid. I would put it down if I were you.
Oh, God. That's... All right, well, that's taken care of. We here at New Pet Animal Rescue are committed to making sure nothing like that ever happens again. And can we count on you? Will you help? Contact New Pet Animal Rescue now and help us stray, or help us clean up the streets of vermin. That's good, too. What the hell was that? Was the bull?
What's that sound? It sounds like skeletal footsteps coming down the lane. The flapping of tattered robes in the wind, the metallic song of a reaper's scythe dragging on the ground. My little Wolfman is when death arrives. It's usually the end of the story, but for some of us it's just the beginning. As promised, In the Dark Radio has returned, and with it, your master of ceremonies, the big, bad Wolfman. What stories, you ask? Well, let me put it to you this way. Some people with sticky fingers think that whatever it is of yours they want is something you can't take with you when you go. I got a few stories up my sleeve that prove that little cliche. Dead wrong.
George Flint loved to eat. Each day at noon he closed his cabin shop for 2 hours and went home for a big lunch with his wife Nina cooked for him. George was a bully, and Nina was a timid woman who did everything he asked because she was afraid of him. On his way home from lunch one day, George stopped at the butcher shop and bought a pound of liver. He loved liver. He would have Nina cook it for dinner that night. Despite all his complaints about her, she wasn't a very good cook. While George ate his lunch, Nina told him that a rich old woman in town had died. Her body was in the church next door. It was in an open coffin. Anyone who wanted to see her could. As usual, George was not interested in what Nina had to say. I've got to go back to work, he told her. After he left, Nina began to cook the liver. She added vegetables and spices and simmered it all afternoon, just the way George liked it. When she thought it was done, she cut off a small piece and tasted it. It was delicious. The best she had ever made. She ate a second piece, then a third. It was so good she could not stop eating it. It was only when the liver was all gone that she thought of George. He would be coming home soon. What would he do when he found out that she had eaten all of the liver? Some men would laugh, but not George. He would be angry and mean, and she did not want to face that again. Well, where could she get another piece of liver that late in the day? Then she remembered the old woman lying in the church next door waiting to be buried. George said he had never had a better dinner. Have some liver, Mina, he said. It's just delicious. I'm not hungry, she said. You finish it. That night, after George had fallen asleep, Nina sat in the bed trying to read, but all she could think about was what she had done. Then she thought she heard a woman's voice. revelation. Was she dreaming? Now the voice was closer.
Who has my liver?
It asked.
Who has it?
Mina wanted to run.
No, no,
She whimpered.
I don't have it. I don't have your liver.
Now the voice was right next to her.
Who has my liver?
It asked.
Who has it?
Mina froze with terror. She pointed to George.
He does.
She said.
He has it.
Suddenly, the light went out, and George screamed and screamed.
An old lady got sick and died. She had no family and no close friends, so the neighbors got a grave digger to dig a grave for her. And they had a coffin made, and they placed it in her living room. As was the tradition, they washed her body and dressed her up in her best clothes and put her in her coffin. When she died, her eyes were wide open, staring at everything and seeing nothing. The neighbors found $2 silver on her dresser, and they put them on her eyelids to keep them closed. They lit candles and sat up with her so that she would not be too lonely on that first night that she was dead. The next morning, a preacher came and said a prayer for her. Then everybody went home. Later, the gravedigger arrived to take her to the cemetery and bury her. He stared at the silver dollars on her eyes, and he picked them up. How shiny, how smooth they were, how thick and heavy. They're beautiful, he thought. Just beautiful. He looked at the dead woman with her eyes wide open. He felt she was staring at him, watching him hold her coins. It gave him a creepy feeling. He put the coins back on those eyes of hers to keep them closed. But before he knew it, his hands reached out again and grabbed the coins and stuck them in his pocket. Then he grabbed a hammer and quickly nailed shut the lid of the coffin. "Now you can't see anything," he said to her. Then he took her out to the cemetery and buried her as fast as he could. When the gravedigger got home, he put the $2 silver in a tin box and shook it. The coins made a cheerful rattling sound, but the gravedigger wasn't feeling cheerful, oh no. He couldn't forget those eyes looking at him. When it got dark, a storm came up, and the wind started blowing. It blew all around the house. It came in through the cracks and around the windows and down the chimney. Whizzoo! It went. Whizzee, whizzee, whizzoo! And the fire flared and flickered. The gravedigger threw some fresh wood on the fire, got into bed, and pulled the blankets up to his chin. The wind kept blowing. Bazoo! It went. Bazoo! The fire flared and flickered and cast evil-looking shadows on the walls. The gravedigger lay there thinking about the dead woman's eyes, staring at him. The wind blew stronger and louder, and the fire flared and flickered and popped and snapped, and he got more and more scared. Suddenly, he heard another sound. Clinkety-clink, clinkety-clink it went. Clinkety-clink. It was the silver dollars rattling in the tin box. "Hey!" the gravedigger shouted. "Who's taking my money?" But all he heard was the wind blowing. Bzee, bzee, bzoo! And the flames flared and flickered and snapped and popped, and the coins going clinkety-clink, clinkety-clink. He leapt out of bed and chained up the door. Then he hurried back, but his head had barely touched the pillow when he heard clinkety-clink, clinkety clink. Then he heard somewhere way off in the distance, it was a voice crying, "Where's my money? Who's got my money? Oh!" And the wind blew, whizzee, whizzee, zoo. And the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped, and the money went clinkety clink, clinkety clink. The gravedigger was really scared. He got out of bed again and piled all the furniture against the door. He put a heavy iron skillet over the tin box. Then he jumped back into bed and covered his head with the blankets. But the money rattled louder than ever. And way off, the voice cried, "Give me my money! Who's got my money? Who?" And the wind blew, and the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped, and the gravedigger shivered and shook and cried, "Oh, Lordy, oh, Lordy!" Suddenly, the front door flew open, and in walked the ghost of the dead woman with her eyes open, staring at everything and seeing nothing. And the wind blew, whizzee, whizzee, whizzoo, and the money went clinkety clink, clinkety clink, and the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped, and the ghost of the dead woman cried, "Oh, where is my money? Who's got my money? Who? And the gravedigger moaned, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy!" The ghost could hear the money going clinkety clink, clinkety clink in the tin box, but her dead eyes couldn't see the box. So she reached out with her arms and tried to find it. The wind went whizzee, whizzee, whizzoo, and the money rattled clinkety clink, clinkety clink, and the fire flared and flickered and popped and snapped, and the gravedigger shivered and shook and moaned, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy!" And the woman cried, "Give me my money! Who's got my money? Who? Who? You got it!"
Daisy Clark had been in a coma for more than a month when the doctor said she had finally died. She was buried on a cool summer day in a small cemetery about a mile from her home. May she always rest in such peace, her husband said. But she didn't. Late that night, a grave robber with a shovel and a lantern began to dig her up. Since the ground was still soft, he quickly reached the coffin and got it open. His hunch was right. Daisy had been buried with two valuable things: a wedding ring with a diamond in it, and a ring with a ruby that glowed as if it were alive. The thief got down on his knees, and he reached into the coffin to get the rings, but they were stuck to her fingers. So he decided the only way to get them was to cut off her fingers with a knife. But when he cut into the finger with the wedding ring, it began to bleed, and Daisy Clark began to stir. Suddenly, she sat up. Terrified, the thief scrambled to his feet. He accidentally kicked over the lantern and the light went out. He could hear Daisy climb out of her grave. As she moved past him in the dark, he stood there frozen with fear, clutching the knife in his hand. When Daisy saw him, she pulled her shroud around her and asked, "Who are you?" When the grave robber heard this corpse speak, he ran. Daisy shrugged her shoulders and went on, and never once looked back. But in his fear and confusion, the thief fled in the wrong direction. He pitched headlong into her grave and fell on the knife and stabbed himself. While Daisy walked home, the thief fled death.
All right, time to shake it up, Daddy-O. You know the station, it's in the dark radio, and I, your host, the big bad Wolfman, have called together a few local artists. For what purpose, you ask? Well, I'm trying to introduce some culture into my life, and I'm inviting you to join me in that regard. Tonight, I'm introducing a new segment to the program, a little thing I call Poetry Corner. Wolf babies, not all stories are told in prose. Some are poems, so here's some of those.
There was a man who lived in Leeds. He filled his garden full of seeds. And when the seeds began to grow, it was like a garden filled with snow. But when the snow began to melt, it was like a ship without a belt. And when the ship began to sail, it was like a bird without a tail. And when the bird began to fly, it was like an eagle in the sky. And when the sky began to roar, it was like a lion at my door. And when the door began to crack, it was like a penknife in my back. And when my back began to bleed, I was dead, dead, dead indeed.
This poem is entitled Old Woman, All Skin and Bone. I know, right? There was an old woman, all skin and bone, who lived near the graveyard all alone. She thought she'd go out in church house style. She thought she'd stop and rest a while. When she came up to the door, she thought she'd stop and rest no more. But when she turned and looked around, she saw a corpse upon the ground. From its nose and down to its chin, the worms crawled out and worms crawled in. The woman said to the preacher, said, "Shall I look like this when I am dead?" And the preacher to the woman said, "You look like this, for you are dead."
Once in this town, there lived a man named Brown. Thank you. It was years ago on this night that he was murdered out of spite. Here we have his remains. First, let's feel his brains. Now here are his eyes, still frozen with surprise. Thank you. Here is his ear. This is his nose. And here his hand, rotting flesh and bones. Yeah. But his hair still grows. And his heart still beats. Now and then. And then. And his blood still flows. Dip your fingers in it. It's nice and warm. That's all there is, except for these worms. They are the ones that ate the rest of him.
The Sliverty. ate all the others, but he didn't eat me. The Sliver-dee-dee, he came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat.
Well, O'Leary is dead and O'Reilly don't know it. O'Reilly is dead and O'Leary don't know it. They both are dead in the very same bed, and neither one knows that the other one's dead.
I was not expecting that. Well, kiddies, it was an experiment. But we're gonna switch tacks and get back to what we know and love. Scary stories to tell in the dark. We've heard the dramas. You've called in your stories. Now I ask you to join me in returning to formula. My friendly neighborhood masters of horror return to my cozy little studio to share the last little sliver of the night with you. We began with ghosts and witches, so let us return to nature as we wander into the twisted woods of the night. These are tales of beasts. In fact, a few of my favorites. We've raised the horrid and twisted nightmare of Alvin Schwartz's work and brought it into the present, and that is how we shall end. We'll hear what he had to say about alligators, a new horse, the white wolf, and close with a brand new story about a viper.
A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night, he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she would complain of her loneliness. The couple had 2 young sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began teaching them how to swim. And when they got older, he would take them swimming in the river at night. They would often stay there all night long, and the woman would stay at home alone. After a while, she began to act strangely. At least, well, that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator, and he was trying to turn the boys into alligators too. Everyone just told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming, that it was just a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any in the area, and everybody knew that. Early one morning, the woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. Her clothes were dripping water. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her into the river and tried to get her to eat a raw fish. She claimed that they were her husband and her sons, and they apparently wanted her to live with them, but she managed to escape. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in the mental institution for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband or her children again. They just vanished. But every now and then, a fisherman would tell about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually, it was one large alligator accompanied by 2 small ones. Most people said the fishermen were just making it up. After all, everyone knows there aren't any alligators out here.
Once upon a time, a young prince lived in a shining castle. No, that's not what we're doing now. Okay, good, yes. Not it. Okay, one time. Yes, good. Yeah. A new horse. 2 farmhands shared a room. One slept at the back of the room, while the other slept near the door. After a while, the one who slept near the door began to feel very tired early in the day. His friend, concerned, asked what was wrong. An awful thing happens to me every night, he explained. A witch, she turns me into a horse. She rides me. Just, all over the countryside.
Oh my.
I'll sleep in your bed tonight then, his friend offered. We'll see if it happens to me, too. About midnight, an old woman who lived nearby snuck into the room. She mumbled some strange words over the farmhand, and he found he couldn't move. Then she slipped a bridle on him, and he turned into a horse. The next thing he knew, she was riding him across the fields at a breakneck speed, beating him to make him race even faster. Soon they came to a house where a party was going on. There was lots of music and dancing. They were having a great time inside. The witch hitched him to a fence and went inside. While she was gone, the farmhand rubbed against the fence until the bridle came off, allowing him to turn back into a human being. He went into the house and found the witch. He repeated the words that she had spoken over him, and with the bridle, he turned her into a horse. This goes on. Then he rode her to a blacksmith and had her fitted with horseshoes. Afterwards, he rode her to the farm where she lived. I have a pretty good filly here, he told her husband. I need a stronger horse. You want to trade? What's up? The old man looked her over and said he would do it. So choosing the horse, he would trade for the mare the farmhand rode away. The husband led his new horse to the barn. He took off the bridle and went to hang it up, but when he came back, the new horse was gone. Instead, there stood his wife, horseshoes nailed to her hands and feet. Oh, it turns out she was the horse then.
The white wolf. Long ago, the timber wolves around French Creek had gotten out of hand. There were so many wolves, the farmers couldn't prevent them from killing their livestock. So the state had a bounty on them. They would pay a hunter $10 for every wolf pelt they turned in, which was great pay at the time. A butcher in town named Bill Wilson thought it was a pretty good money, so he stopped working as a butcher and began hunting wolves. He was quite the shot. Every year he killed over 500 wolves, giving him more than $5,000. In those days, that was an enviable amount of money. After 4 or 5 years, Bill had killed so many wolves that there were hardly any left in the area. So he retired, and he vowed never to harm another wolf because they were the reason he had become so wealthy. Then one day, a farmer reported that a white wolf had killed 2 of his sheep. He had shot at it and hit it, but the bullets had no effect on the beast. Soon, that same wolf was seen all over the countryside, killing and running. The creature was unstoppable. One night, he even came into Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill forgot about his promise to never harm another wolf. He went into town the next morning and bought a young lamb for bait. He took it out into the hills and tied it to a tree. Then he backed off about 50 yards, waiting under another tree, anxiously waiting for the wolf as his gun rested on his lap. When Bill didn't come back, his friends began to look for him. Finally, they found the lamb. It was still tied to a tree, unharmed. Though it was hungry, it was still alive. Then they found Bill. He was leaning against the tree where he had waited, dead. His throat had been torn open. Oddly, there was no sign of struggle. His gun hadn't even been fired. Also, there were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen Again.
He was calling himself Anthony these days. Anthony was still unpacking boxes in the gray dimness of the first day, still putting books into shelves and clothes into drawers, and the heavy thing in the wooden box into a safe hiding place. They set him up with a job. He started next Monday, but he still had time to settle himself, time to get used to the new digs, and time to forget that night in June. He didn't know why he hooked up the phone on that gray morning. Perhaps they'd call him soon to tell him that the coast was clear, but he wasn't optimistic, any more than he knew why the phone rang mere hours before he hooked it up. Maybe his new landlord or his new boss, any more than he knew why he picked up as enthusiastically as he did. Hello? This is Anthony, he said with feigned cheerfulness. Hello, Anthony, said a low, tense voice he didn't recognize with a touch of some foreign accent he couldn't place. I am the Viper. I come for you in 2 days. Click. Anthony felt the muscles in his back pulled tight as piano wire. His grip tightened around the phone, still held to his ear, expectantly, as if the silent static of a dead line would give way to some further details. A full minute later, he set the phone back down on the hook and thought, maybe it was just a crank call. No one at all had this number except the agents and himself, right? It must be someone having a laugh, or maybe... No, it couldn't possibly be. It was just a crank caller. Anthony made himself a snack and tried to put it out of his mind. In the late afternoon, in the dark of the late afternoon of the second day, Anthony found himself quite uncharacteristically enjoying a cup of tea. His old self wouldn't have had one at all, or wouldn't have enjoyed it, but Anthony was just this type of fellow he imagined. He set his mug down next to the wooden box with the heavy thing inside. Boss Magnus once told him never to let it out of his sight. Since the phone rang yesterday, he hadn't. The phone rang again. Perhaps it was his new job. He started on Monday, calling to give him some details. It was probably important. He stood and he picked up the horn. Hello, this is Anthony, he said, again feigning some enthusiasm. Hello again, Anthony, said the Viper. I am the Viper. Be ready. I come for you tomorrow. Click. Anthony shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He gingerly set down the phone and felt the sweat beat up on his forehead as he racked every corner of his brain for an answer. The Viper. He imagined he remembered someone who used that name, the Cobra, the Anaconda, the Constrictor, maybe. No. It must have been the Viper. But who was he? One of Boss Magnus's soldiers? An independent hitman? He opened the wooden box and he ran his fingers over the heavy thing inside. Boss Magnus once told Anthony, before he was Anthony, that it hadn't been fired since 1992. That Anthony's father last fired it in defense of his own son. How fitting. As he loaded the Colt slowly, bullet by bullet, he remembered that Boss Magnus told him when they last met that there was nowhere he could run, no place he could hide. Maybe he was right. Maybe he could never escape the mistake he'd made that night in June. But as he drew back the hammer on his father's pistol, Anthony swore to make the Viper sorry he ever slithered out of his hole. Him and any other snake Boss Magnus sent after him. He sat on the sofa chair in the front room, laid his pistol on his lap, and he waited. The hours passed like days as the blood poured into his ears and electrified his fingertips. He'd never shot a man. That's not to say he'd never killed a man, but he'd never shot a man. His steely fingers tensed and relaxed on the handle. Just as his jaw tensed and relaxed, his pupils dilated and contracted, and he stared at the door, the knob, the lock, the keyhole, and into the blackness he once inhabited when he had a different name, and suddenly it was morning. His eyes were red and cold in the smoky light of the late morning and focused on the door, and there came a knock. and another, and another. Anthony rose from his chair, priming his pistol and standing to the side of the doorframe. "Who is it?" he said smoothly, with a voice he didn't quite recognize. "I am the Viper," came the answer. Anthony peered through the peephole and saw nothing. He's off to one side, he thought. Now or never. He steeled himself stealthily, reached for the knob and tore the door open, pointed his father's pistol into thin air. He looked down, and a diminutive man, fully a foot and a half shorter than Anthony, suddenly squealed at the sight of the gun. A diminutive man with a squeegee and a bucket. "Who are you?" demanded Anthony. "I am the Viper," the little man said timidly, holding down the bucket. I wish to wash and wipe your windows."
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, all my little wolf babies, our time together grows short. In the gutter and flame of our little program, I bring to you the final act of our broadcast. A little tune to dance to, a little number I like to call, "Oh, How That Dead Man Dance." Aaron Kelly, he was dead. I'll tell you that to begin. His wife bought him a coffin and right quickly buried him. But that night he rose from his grave and dusted off the lawn. The rotting corpse walked to his widow and he said, "Hi, honey, I'm home." To his widow and he said, "You look like someone died, my dear. Won't you tell me who's dead? Yes, widow said you are. We just laid you beneath the stones." Cadaver said, "I don't feel dead, so I will rest right here and warm my bones." The dead man stayed in his chair and he rocked right there. You'd hear his dead voice speak and his dead voice creak. No matter how that widow begged him to just leave her alone, there wasn't any getting rid of old Aaron Kelly's bone. Well, Hitler came a-coming, hoping to ask that widow's hands. He found his dear beloved screaming at her dead husband. Said, "Get back in your grave, old son. That life insurance ain't a joke." That line is, "And if you don't pretend that you're alive, your poor old widow's flat broke." Poor widow. Thinking fast, that crafty fiddler went and opened up his case. And he looked at Aaron Kelly, said, "Let's liven up the place. You look like a dancing man who wouldn't pass up a chance to stretch out your rotten legs, old son. Now let's get up and dance." To the floor, the widow spurred the fiddler on to fiddle more and more. Faster now and faster now, the fiddler did play, till little nuts of Aaron Kelly flew each every way with his long legs flicking. Long legs flicking. And knee bones knocking. Knee bones knocking. Dead and hopping, dry bones dropping. They're dead out way pieces popping. This is fun. The fiddler just threw up his hands and cried, "That's it, I'm done." The wind